And seems like we're getting there here. Good. Okay. So let's just go ahead and wait for a few people coming in. I'm going to pull this up on my Facebook. We are streaming. It should be on our page currently.
Let's see.
Yeah. Very good. We'll just wait for a few more people to come in. If you share, and I'm going to do this right now. Great. I just shared it to my timeline. And we'll get started in just a minute as we get more people coming in here. Do you see the Facebook link?
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Awesome. All right. Well, we got Katrina just joined. And welcome everybody. As we're getting a few more listeners, we'll just get started in a minute. This is going to be a really exciting conversation. Carson, I'm just going to start asking you questions because I'm fascinated by everything you have to say. But we're just going to wait just one more minute for a few more people to come in. And then we'll get right started. All right. Hello, everybody who's watching right now. We have 7 viewers so far. Hello.
Just give me 1 second. I'm getting a little feedback between my watch party and my Zoom.
Hey, Manny.
There we go.
Sounds good.
All right, we should be good now.
All right. Hey, Leo, how's it going? Good to see you. Good to see everybody that's in here. Hey, Manny, good to see you. All right. Let's go ahead and get started so that we don't waste any time. So everybody, welcome to tonight's talk on compassionate and effective marketing during a worldwide crisis, featuring Carson Dorsey. We're very, very excited to have Carson Dorsey. I will say that we have the privilege of having her on our board, and she's been not only helpful, but very much instrumental in developing our marketing strategies, and our concert promotions, and just moving forward and growing Veridegree to what it is now. So I can't say that we could have done it without her for sure. So, and in addition to that, I just want to say that Carson is a musician, and one of the strengths that she has is that she's currently in the corporate marketing world, and what the knowledge that she brings into nonprofits is pretty visionary, to say the least. It has really transformed the way that we think about viewership and promotion, and is really helpful. So thanks, Carson, for joining us tonight. It's really good to have you. I'm excited for this conversation.
Glad to be here.
All right.
Go ahead. Well, actually, I just want to say a few things to that point, just so people have a little bit more understanding of my background and where I'm coming from. As Sam said, like many of you watching, I'm also a singer. I hesitate to say former singer since I'm still doing a lot of it. So like many of you, my undergrad, my master's were all in conservatory settings. I did the solo singing thing for a little bit, and now I work for the USA Today network, developing kind of marketing strategies for smaller to larger brands across the US. So all the information that I'm bringing to you is both in terms, is kind of, it's a nice picture across what everyone is experiencing, because I work in all different verticals and all different industries, and I obviously have my hand in for-profit and non-for-profit. So I'm really looking forward to sharing, what's similar across all of these, but also what is slightly different and needs to be tweaked.
Sounds good. Well, we're very excited to get started on this. And Carson, let's just start with the fact that COVID-19 happened in very beginning of March, and we quickly got into the situation that we're in right now, which is non-functional, basically, with the exception of a few organizations that are doing streaming and content and stuff. And can you talk a little bit about how that has changed the landscape of arts organizations right now, especially in Dallas, but really worldwide, and what it looks like now versus then?
Well, I feel like a lot of that most people are already pretty privy to, especially watching here. Everything has essentially shut down in terms of arts organizations and what they're used to producing. It hasn't just affected the organizations themselves. It also has hit across all aspects of the industry. Managers aren't making money right now. Artists aren't making money right now. People who work in production and administration, right? So everything's taken a really big hit. I think the first thing when I have conversations with my peers who are working in arts administration or are actively singing, I think the first thing to remember is we have to have a little bit of hope, especially in terms of classical music or classical leaning music. When opera was invented in the early 1600s, they said it would die within 20 years because there was just no way to fund it. And here we are, 400 plus years later, right? So I don't think it's ever going to go away. I think what's hard right now is determining which organizations will be able to stick it out and which won't. And I think when it comes to that, we're having to learn how to adapt. And coronavirus is really showing us a lot of the problems that were already there, right? We were already battling a lot of things simply because what we offer is an experience, right? Yes, you can listen to us online and you can watch us, but really what we've been pitching and all of our marketing so far has always been focused towards the live experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we do best. But now we're in a situation where that's going to be on halt for a little while. So in order for us to, and I think eventually we'll get back there, and that is going to be what we do again, right? But in the meantime, how are we going to adapt to stay relevant to our audience, keep some kind of revenue stream, but also keep a presence? So there's a lot that's going into this. I think in terms of what we've talked about within Verdigris, for instance, I think it's really important to take a look at what your organization does holistically, right? Obviously, the main thing we focus on and build everything around are those live experiences, are those concerts, are those shows, right? But what are other things that your organization does well and does best? Being a nonprofit, it's very unlikely that the only thing you do is just put on concerts, right? There's going to be some element of of outreach, no matter what, right? So I think finding ways to, and in a lot of ways, that outreach is easier to take online than perhaps a live performance, right? So what are some things that we can adapt and do to show that we have solidarity with our, cultural partners, and our community, but also, could maybe find a way to leverage a little bit more revenue, or in this case, donations.
That sounds that sounds pretty in line with a lot of things that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks.
For sure.
Last week we talked about our outreach initiative to Griner, and I will say that yes, it is really important to focus on the community, but it's also a pretty significant challenge to do it during this time. For us specifically, the ramifications of shelter at home don't just extend to our performances, but they also extend to how much we can be in the classroom. And to be quite honest, how much we're willing to be in the classroom, given the fact that, children are very much known to be carriers of various, sicknesses and so on and so forth. So it becomes a little bit of a way, a little bit of a challenge there as well that we're sort of dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But one of the things that I will say that we have done for those of our viewers who were not able to tune in to last week's conversation about Griner is we are starting voice lessons. We are starting online teaching twice a week, basically doing what we did before, except just doing it in Zoom rather than in person. So this kind of goes into the next part that I want to talk with you about, that I'm actually legitimately interested in knowing is, and that is like, what do you see audiences looking for right now? And what does that mean for our making of art these days? Like, what does that mean for us in terms of production? What does that mean for us in terms of implementation and for our future?
Yeah, so this is a hard question because I think there's a lot of opinions, right? I think this, in some ways, in some places data doesn't lie, but there's also a certain amount of subjectivity. And when we're speaking with artists, there's kind of there's something personal about it. And at the end of the day, when you're talking to like someone who's in like corporate marketing now, can be sensitive. So I'm just going to go out there and say it. Audiences are looking at everything right now. I mean, they have nothing else to do, right? So when everything is out there, it's kind of like, it's a catch. There are eyes on you, but they'll also get tired of you quicker, right? Because there's just never ending content. And honestly, this isn't something that's new either. There are more eyes on social media and on the TV and everywhere, but it's just an extra hour or so a day. It wasn't like yes, there's a boost, but it's not as big as you think it is, right? That being said, I think it's really important to kind of go back to basics when we're talking about this, right? Because we have to separate two things, right? You're talking about what is it like to make art, but art for what purpose, right? So in terms of the way you're thinking, and we'll just make it a conversation, Sam, but in terms of the way you're thinking right now, when you're talking about creating art, right? You're talking about creating art for an audience or for self-fulfillment? Because, right?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
I think it's both. I think I wouldn't want to do a project that I didn't feel particularly passionate about, but I also want our musical product and our projects to be reflective of what our community is doing. But that's the advantage that we have in Verdigris, because we're modeled in a way that allows that kind of thing. There are organizations in the United States that are solely focused on a single composer or on a single period. You know what I'm saying?
So I think what's hard here is if we're deciding if we're speaking organizationally. Right now we're talking in terms of Verdigris. So let's talk about an organization, right? If it's an organization, right, that is creating some type of art, right? You have to remember that social media and all of your digital marketing platforms are marketing platforms, right? I know we want to feel, because it's so easy and it's easy to engage and easy to do on our own, right? We just have to download the app. Where all of the social media stuff started and where it is a very different place right now. Everything that you're putting online is marketing. it's some form of self-marketing, even if it's a personal page, right? It's like when people used to go to church every Sunday and put on their Sunday best and make sure everything looked a certain way because they wanted their community to think something of them, right? In order to get ahead socially, or marry their daughter off to that person, like whatever it is, they want to appear a certain way. Now we just do that digitally via social media. So it is marketing, which means when you're an organization, we kind of have to go back to, what does our organization do? What are the tenets of our brand? Really, what is our mission statement, right? What is in line with our mission? And let's be really focused, right? I think what is starting to grate on me as someone who follows a lot of obviously arts and artists and opera singers and choirs, right? And symphonies. I think what's really starting to grate on me is the massive content dump, right? I think a lot of artists are turning to these like brand names that they've worked for or been a part of, and seeing it as their opportunity to share their art. Okay, however, that art needs to be very in line with an ultimate goal, right? I think it's very important to make sure that what you're sharing is in line with development and marketing goals, right? So when we're talking about marketing, right? A lot of times that's including ticket sales and merchandise and extras, right? Right now we don't have ticket sales. So what can we put on there to drive awareness of what our product is once we're back to normal? Or what are we doing internally to develop a different type of product and revenue stream that then we can promote online? That's still in line with our brand and will seamlessly transition into normal life again, right? On the other side, development should also be utilizing these. And I don't really think, I don't even think really big organizations have figured this out yet, that all of our social media and marketing tools need to be used on both ends, right? A lot of times they're not as integrated as I personally feel that they should be to drive certain messages home, right? Which also means you have to be clear in your messaging. You can't have like 6 different campaigns running at once on the same brands. It'll get confusing. It'll be overload, and users just won't respond very well. And even more so if it's not consistent messaging, whether it's, we need money, donate to us, or we're selling this merchandise, or here, sign up for a lesson, right? If you're not selling like product or services or asking for money, right? If you're intertwining these and you have 6 different messages and you're also putting this up and also putting that up, what ends up happening is there's no consistent messaging. So when a user is going through their feed, they're seeing you, but they're not recognizing you because it doesn't look the same as last time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think we have to remember when we're working on our own organization, we can see that narrative that we're building, and we know what it looks like because we're spending all day with it, and things like it are always going to pop up on our smart feeds because they're smart, right? But to reach other users who aren't necessarily always involved with our organization or this artist, we have to have some kind of consistency. I think Vera Degree does a really great job in image consistency. Image consistency. We have a very specific visual aesthetic, and that carries through very well. So out of the corner of my eye, I kind of know if it's our photographer or if it's our graphic or our image. And that's really great for brand awareness, because that's the trick right now. Especially for small organizations that don't necessarily have huge streaming capabilities and other huge infrastructures on their website, or this to sell this or do this and e-commerce that, and they might not have the resources to necessarily do that, but to keep a brand awareness, they do, because at the end of this, that who is recognized will still be there, right? People will still come. Excuse me. So I think we're really dealing with multiple issues, and a lot of it has to go back to all the content you put out has to be extremely focused. extremely focused to your message. And I think ultimately understanding that creating art is one thing, and the freedom to do that is something that is special within that live experience, which is usually what we're based around. It's not going to be quite the same on social media, right? Now, streaming a concert and singing in that way, that's one thing, if you're driving traffic to that. But daily content, while it is creative in nature, it has a very, very specific and targeted purpose. Otherwise, it falls flat.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about this then. Let's dive a little bit deeper, and let's specifically focus on performing arts for just a minute.
Okay.
Because we've seen a lot of, you're talking about consistency of content, but I wonder, because, we're currently as a performing arts.
Consistency of messaging.
Yeah, sure.
Not necessarily content.
Sure. Understood. So with all that being said, there needs to be a moment of sort of like innovation here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because we don't have the opportunity to be able to do performances, and even if we did have the opportunity to give performances, there's no guarantee of having an audience. So like how do we do that? And like, how do we focus our marketing in a way that either makes audiences feel safe enough to be able to attend the concert, or incentivizes them enough to be able to view the content in other forms?
So in terms of returning to the live experience, I think that's where we all have the most anxiety, because the reality of that is I can't answer that for you, because nobody can answer that question right now. Yeah. And what exactly it's going to look like, we'll know more in 2 weeks. We're specifically based in Texas here, right? And we're opening up tomorrow, right? And so we'll see in 2 weeks when they reevaluate if there's a resurgence. We'll see, right? I think the best tactic in terms of the return to take is prepare for the worst, hope for the best. At least for me, I'm functioning under, really being prepared for the worst. In terms of that, until this is over and until we're at full capacity, I think the reality is no, we're not going to bringing in the same revenue that we do with the real season. We're just not going to be able to replace that. That's not what this art form is. It's not that you can't adapt some aspects of it, but I think you're going to be adapting services, not necessarily the experience. Because the reality is, no, you cannot recreate the live experience. If you did, we would have never built this choir. You just can't. And people still pay for experiences. The other industry that's hurting a lot right now is the restaurant industry, right? For the exact same reason. I mean, people can all make their food at home, but there's something special about being in that environment and experiencing it through somebody else's service and hands. And, in terms of art, that's what we do too. That's the professional versus the amateur. Everybody plays guitar. Everybody can sing and they enjoy doing it, right? But why do they come to a concert? Because there's something special about seeing someone of this caliber with, in this setting, so perfectly curated and crafted. There's something about that, and there's something magical about that. So I think we have to be real in terms of, will we have the same amount of revenue and ever be able to replace it? No. Now, do I think that doesn't mean there are ways to now invest in being more innovative about different types of revenue streams? Yes. Right? And I think that means we're going to have to look into different types of services that we can offer, instead of with our art and our season being the driving force behind what we do. But in addition to that, what are other things we do, right? And I think for instance, with Griner, right? That's our big outreach program. We've found ways to continue that outreach, right? So in terms of that, you're able to keep your outreach up. That is a part of your nonprofit organization. You'll still be able to raise revenue for through things like grant applications and, donors. That's a huge cornerstone of, development, right? On the other hand, you might be able to adapt that service into, paid lessons with kids across the community, right? You have a whole group of singers. Maybe people would like to, take lessons with that specific singer that they heard at Verdigris, right? Or, take advice with how do I prepare for this college audition? That's one I get a lot right now, from even my personal students. Oh, what are auditions going to look like? How do I prepare? I don't even know. What's it going to be? What, you know what I mean? So I think there are ways to take aspects of your business, of your organization now, and find other ways to expand that reach that's still in line with things that you've already done, and will hopefully ultimately promote future ticket sales. When is that future? Who knows? I think you're not going to have full capacity until the 2022 season. I think
2022.
Yeah, fall of 2021 to 2022. Well, yeah, I think that's, if you're really asking me, that's what I feel like, just in terms of all the conversations I've had with doctors and health professionals. I don't think we're going to be back to normal until the season following the upcoming one fully. I just think that's the reality of it. So then if that's the case, let's say we do smaller concerts, right? And we do things that are, within the lines of social distancing, right?
Yeah.
You're still only going to have a certain amount of tickets you can sell. So what are you going to do? Jack up the price? That's not really in line with our marketing and branding and product, right? So at the end of the day, it's going to have to be a lower cost season. We're going to have to find other ways to innovate our revenue streams that might not be from public performance. And let's say we do some of these concerts, there's still going to be more promotional and brand awareness. They're not going to bring in a ton of revenue, right? So it's kind of like finding ways to bide our time until we can get back to our fully fleshed out product. However, what we hope we learn in this process are things that we can take from COVID-19 and having to adapt to online or virtual, what we can take from that and then carry through as an additional revenue stream in the future.
For our audiences right now, as you're listening to this, if you please comment and let us know how long you think COVID-19 is going to last, because I really hope to God that it doesn't last until 2022. But I want to hear your opinion too. Let us know in the comments below, and let us know what you think. I really hope it's not 2022. So, Carson, do you think, and I can comment on this too, but do you think that audiences are going to be coming back out once things reopen?
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Not at all. I mean, we're reopening tomorrow, and do you know what we did? My husband's at the grocery store right now because he's worried that once it reopens tomorrow, people are going to flood the grocery stores and start to hoard up again. And if people aren't socially distancing, I mean, there's a very high risk of a resurgence. There just is.
Well, let's just start with the fact that today we had record number of COVID cases in a day.
And we're reopening tomorrow. Fantastic.
I really hope this doesn't happen.
Well, and then here's the starker reality of being in the arts. I obviously, like, my entire education and career thus far has been arts related. However, in times like this, the arts are not the greatest need. So we kind of have to go back to what is, like, it's a more philosophical question, but what is the purpose of art, and how can we fill that need in this time? Does that make sense? People are focused on so many other things right now. Losing their job, when can I go to the grocery store to buy food? Kids aren't in school. So I think in terms of content, and some of the things that we can do as we're innovating is remembering kind of what our purpose is hope, you know. So making sure that everything that we're creating is really cognizant of that, and in that way positive and uplifting and really ingrained in providing that service to your community. Which on the other end of that doesn't mean that you have to strike a balance between what you can ask people to pay for and what you just give. You know, it's unrealistic to think people who have just lost their jobs and have 3 kids and mouths to feed and are waiting on a stimulus check, but love music, it's silly to think that, you know, they're going to spend that $40 to tune into the streaming service for this you know, opera or whatever, you know. So I just think being really thinking in the greater context, which I know when we're in the arts community can be a little difficult sometimes, because that's what we're surrounded by all the time. And so we really know what its worth is, and because it's so important to us. However, it is also equally wise to remember, you know, what is going on and what is at the top of people's minds. So what are ways that you can provide hope and a reprieve from that in a generous way? When I say generous, I don't necessarily mean free, I just mean generous. Does that make sense?
That's a good point. Have you seen any organizations that have done a particularly good job of this? I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
You know, I'd have to say, in terms of what I'm seeing on my feed, it's mostly individuals as opposed to organizations. And that's not shocking to me. I think that's usually the case. I'm trying to think in terms of arts organizations.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, I think the arts organizations that I appreciate the most right now are the ones that are staying consistent. So for instance, like Chicago Lyric, they're keeping their messaging consistent, right? So yes, they might be pointing to other streaming services and this and that, but their brand is reliable. They're sharing things that are relevant to what they do. You know, it's a reminder, like the images and the things that they're sharing are a reminder of what we're missing, which in a way is like, oh, you know, but it's also kind of smart because it's like, oh man, that production looks so beautiful. I'm so sad I can't go right now. Yeah, but you know what? I'll keep following because you know what? They're going to open someday, and I can't wait to see that again. Right. So I think having reminders of what the organization is important. You know, being COVID relevant is not about ignoring everything you were before. It's about keeping consistency, but also, you know, showing solidarity with your viewers, reminding them, you know, and that's what I thought about with Chicago Lyric. They're still reminding people to buy tickets, not explicitly, but they're saying, this is what we do. Someday we'll be back again and you can buy a ticket for it, right? And they're mixing that in with other, you know, maybe more fun and COVID related things, right? But we can't forget what you were, right? Because then you're going to come back with this other content, but in the whole year that we've been dealing with COVID, we thought you were something else now, right? So I think it's you still have to stay on brand and on message. Otherwise we don't recognize you, right? And it's some of the content and the periphery that we can do that fills that gap. So perfect example is Bear Degree has done arts happy hours in the past, right? Well, maybe that's not as necessary anymore, and bringing it into a virtual platform still fills that need and something that we're known for, but that's something that we can maybe carry forward, and it's a double-edged sword, right? It's still fulfilling that purpose that Bear Degree was founded in and started in, with bringing arts leaders and community members together to have really candid discussions. But there's not necessarily any reason to have to do that live. You can do that virtually and extend your reach in a larger way, right? So those are the types of ways that we can be adaptable. Larger organizations are going to struggle more with this.
They'll still exist at the end of the day because they have the larger donors that can float them, right? However, kind of the beauty of being a smaller organization is you can adapt, right? Which kind of leads to another, well, there's another point that I'd like to lead to, but I want to make sure that I get to all of your pressing questions first.
No, please, by all means, go for it.
I think, and I know this on the smaller scale, working with like individual singers and having been one myself, artists are really good at content generation, but not measuring. And when I say measuring, it's going back and making sure that everything they're putting out, or checking on what they're putting out and making sure people are engaging with it and your audience is responding. Because just because you like it doesn't mean that everybody else does, right? And it's not an exact science, right? It's a lot of correlation and it might take some time. But I think what's important to remember is, you know, the time you spend on crafting your digital, like doing your digital marketing, whether you're an individual doing it, whether you are a small organization or a large organization. And large organizations tend to, not all of them, be better at this. Really making sure that there is some semblance of return on investment, right? It's not going to be as explicit as it is, for instance, with like some of my you know, brick and mortar store clients, or, you know, plumbing clients, or, you know, hospital clients, right? Where there's something where they're linking and there's still going to be a service that's very needed. There's going to be very clear like lead generation and this and that. It might not be that clear, but also the service that I work for takes care of that extra time, right? So when I'm talking about you as an individual or small organization, you have to be respectful of your own time, right? Generating content and dealing with all this is very time consuming. It takes a lot, right? So you shouldn't be spending all of that time producing content that's not really even doing its job, right? And so I think that's where a lot of small organizations and artists haven't quite figured COVID out yet, right? Because they have all this free time. So let's just put stuff out there. Well, if you're putting too much out there, you are going to alienate your viewers. They just get sick of you. Or if the content, or you're putting a lot out there and the content's really good, maybe you're gaining a ton of new viewers. But you have to know what's working and what's not, right? I think it's really important to make sure that what you're doing is engaging. I mean, people right now, it's not that there are so many more eyes, right? People still check their phones multiple times a day before this. It's that people have more time to engage. They have more time to write you back and like, and then scroll through everything. They have more time to spend on it, right? But that feed is just even more saturated than it was before. So everything has to be specific and clear. As an artist or a small organization, you still have to realize that the time that you're spending producing that content and putting it out there is time spent, right? And it shouldn't be that foreign of a concept to musicians, especially who are gig workers, right? I charge $70 an hour per lesson. Okay, great. So let's say or I get charged this much per hour for a church gig, or I get charged per gig, right? Like if you're going to break that down, let's say on average you get paid $50 an hour, right? Okay, so how much time are you spending on the social media, right? If your time is worth $50 an hour, are you getting that kind of return on all of your content in terms of who is seeing it, who's engaging with it, what is it leading to, right? But we have to know what that is. So I think that's the biggest hurdle for creatives specifically. They're great at putting it out there, but not great at measuring the back end to one, hone in on content that's actually meeting their user, but two, using their resources wisely, because especially with small organizations and individuals, the greatest resource they have is their time. And there's so many other ways that could be spent, you know, practicing or developing the next season, or brainstorming, or spending time with your family. You know, I think this is a good time for people to maybe invest in learning how to do that, learning how to kind of gauge and track some of that content engagement, and really refine their messaging, and maybe get a better structure in place with how you'll proceed.
It's fascinating. And that leads me to my last question of this evening. And that is, so we're talking a lot about content generation. We're talking a lot about relevancy. We're talking about all these really, really important points that I'm really thankful that you're sharing your expertise on. But I think my final question for this evening is, there's been a lot of talk about, do we do this for free or do we charge for it? And I have heard both sides of this argument. I've heard people say, no, it must be free because the people need something and this is going to serve our brand and it's going to serve us very well. And other people that continuously say we can't make art for free, then people will start expecting art for free online all the time and they won't be willing to pay for it. And so my question to you is, do you have an opinion on that? Do you think that there's a certain direction or a certain way that we need to frame that? How do you feel about it?
I don't think it's an all or nothing question. I think it depends on who you are, right? If you're a really big brand, then yeah, people will probably pay for it, right? You could probably find a way to do that. And by all means, if you can get paid for your art, then do it, right? However, if you're a smaller brand, it's unlikely anybody will. I think the hard fact is, and this is nothing new, everybody knows this, like, who sells records anymore? I mean, even though that's used as a promotional tool now. So in terms of streaming art online, a lot of that gets really tricky. If it's just the music itself, good luck. I mean, even Beyonce puts her music online for free now. It's a promotional tool. And what is it promoting? It's driving people to live concerts, right? Even for pop and commercial musicians, they make their money. They have a whole nother stream of revenue, which I'll talk about in a second, but the money from their art is live performance. So they're all hurting in that respect too, right? That's not unique. We don't distribute music in the same way anymore. Like, who goes to iTunes when you can go to Spotify? So the reality is, in terms of, can I sell my music online? The answer is that ship sailed 5 to 10 years ago. Well, not 10, 5. That ship sailed 5 years ago, right? I think then I think it depends on what your art is, right? So in terms of streaming services, the Met is doing theirs for free. If the Met's doing it for free, who's going to pay for you? That's the biggest brand there is in terms of I'm speaking specifically to productions, right? And if we're talking about Verdigris is a choir, but we do put on productions. We did a lot of semi-staged and fully staged, or we were about to get to a fully staged production this year, right? So we do deal in experience. That's when I think it's really important to understand who our major audience is, right? That we could, some conversations we've had is, if you're a choir, educators are really going to watch you a lot, right? Where's the choir tradition or the choral tradition the most strong? It's in churches and schools, right? So making sure that while we want to reach a wider audience than just that, don't neglect that audience. There's actually money to be made there, because they still need the service, or they will still be looking to it, right? So I think it's an understanding of who you are, how big your brand is, and all of your different sources of revenue. Giving your art away for free. One of the reasons Instagram is such a successful platform and an interesting platform is it's actually really reshaped, how the arts, specifically aesthetic arts, but also performing arts industries work entirely. In that, there's self-promotion now, right? A lot of times the middleman might be cut out, right? So
boohoo for agents. But that also means that's where there's people are scouting talent as well. You know, artists will post the visuals of their pieces online, right? Why? Because they're hoping somebody's going to buy the original, right, to hang in their wall. But they still put the image out there, right? So, you know, you can't be a musician and not put your product out there at all. Nobody knows what they're buying into. The issue is what we're usually buying into is a live experience. So understanding that, I think if you are a smaller organization or an individual that is not, you know, super famous, right? I think realistically you are going to have to bite the bullet and give some of it for free. You just are. But it's also an opportunity for people to fall in love with that because they have more time to listen. Right? You know, that being said, perhaps you don't give all of it away. Right? Maybe it's just a couple of highlights or not even the full song or this or that, and say, if you'd like to know more, you know, you can, I mean, maybe not donate, but, you know, with a $20 donation, you can get this entire track and you'll know that you did something great for us. You know, so there might be ways for that. I don't think people are just going to buy it outright. I think it's going to have to be paired with something. I know, but you also have to understand that the place that I come from in terms of art, I feel like there are two types of people. There's the art for art's sake and the art for the community. I am not an arts for art's sake person. And I know there's tons of people within the music and art community, and that is really their MO, and they think it shouldn't matter. I just fundamentally don't agree. And it's totally cool that others do. In which case, I don't necessarily think that comes down to should it be for free. I think it's still here to service an audience in the community.
Yeah.
So what are we doing right now to best accommodate that, considering the times? And the other reality is something I said earlier. You can try to sell it, but no one's going to buy it right now because they got to put food on the table. You know, and that's the age-old issue with running an arts nonprofit is who are you competing with? You're competing with all the other nonprofits because the government doesn't really like to give money to anyone. Anything social service, they just don't care, right? So that has fallen to the private sector and the nonprofit sector, which means we're in constant competition with our, you know, healthcare brothers. That wasn't initially like that. The nonprofit structure was actually created to protect cultural institutions, or actually to create them and protect them from outside influence. But that's a whole nother conversation. So this system is a patronage and stuff is something that we've had since our genesis as arts organizations, like since the 1600s, until, you know, we get to the place where governments in the UK or in Europe, you know, start to fund it and bring it into their government systems. But in terms of, you know, what we're doing here in the US, I mean, it's kind of still in the legacy of what it was back when it was formed, right?
Yeah. Well, and going back to what one of our commenters said a little bit earlier on, Steve Crozier, he said he's had that they've had decent luck suggesting tips and support via Venmo. So there is a third option to this. You know, you can offer it for free, you can offer it as a paid service, or you can offer it for free with an option to donate. And that very well might be something that is.
So then this is what I would. So this is what I would suggest to organizations doing that. I would try that once. You know, I would try that once or a couple of times really, and see, okay, if I'm giving this away for free, first of all, I'm probably going to get more eyes on it because there's not a paywall, right? So promotionally, it's going to reach more people. So I'm going to be more visible. But then, you know, the caveat is maybe someone does Venmo me tips. So out of the generosity of their heart, when there's not a dollar amount attached, if you say this is worth $4, they're going to pay $4. But if you leave it up to them, maybe they'll be like, I'm feeling like I got 25 extra bucks today. So at the end of the day, when you're looking at it with a paywall, but you have subscriptions, are you really going to make more money than if you did it for free
see more people, which does have a dollar amount that you can put a value to, right? Impressions, right? How many times you're seen. Obviously, that's not going to be something you track over time and then you evaluate whatnot, right? But you'll have farther reach and you'll have donations coming in. So with farther reach, higher possibility for donations, the potential to make money is probably much greater than if you have a paywall up.
Yeah, agreed. Well, this has been extremely fascinating, Carson. Thanks for coming on tonight and talking with us. Certainly been, we may not have all the answers, but at least we can start talking about it. So
We have
thanks.
lots of opinions.
Yeah, lots of opinions. Exactly. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thanks for sticking around and for asking good questions and also for commenting. And stick around because we're going to make a big announcement at the beginning of next week regarding the future of our live streaming and our programming as well. So keep in touch with us. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you aren't already, sign up for our newsletter. We'd love to hear from you. Comment on the bottom on how you thought tonight went, or any other questions that you might have, and we'll make sure to answer it. Carson, thanks so much for coming.
Sure. And just one more thing, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram. It's Carson Dorsey Rapaj, which is Rapaj. So you can find me there if you have any questions. I'd be happy to help and advise and give opinions.
Sounds good. And we did tag Carson in the live stream, so you should, in theory, be able to access her profile that way. So very good. Well, thanks so much, Carson, and
problem.
see you guys next week.
All right. Bye.
All right. See ya.